There are a lot of questions archaeologists have to try to answer when they come across an ancient artifact or site. How old is it? Who made it? Why did they make it? What was it used for? There are times when they can answer these questions quite easily, but there are also times when the answers are much harder to find. All the discoveries you're about to see in this video belong to the latter category. In 1828, a Dutch museum acquired a mysterious ancient Egyptian artifact. Its history prior to arrival at the museum is unclear, but scientific analysis of the Alabaster Disc indicated that it's around 4,500 years old. Into the disc, which might possibly have been a tabletop at one point in the distant past, 7 small holes have been drilled, which were probably used to hold oils and incense sticks. Some people believe that it might have been used for embalming, but there are others who believe that it resembles a control panel of some kind. The disc's whole surface is covered in hieroglyphs and markings, some of which have never been seen on any other ancient Egyptian object. It's highly likely that the inscriptions are a set of instructions that lay out the purpose of the object. But as we've never been able to fully translate them, it's impossible to know for sure. Why would anyone go to such trouble to elaborately decorate a table, only for it to be used for embalming? Our next discovery is one that archaeologists know the function of, but we can't imagine how the Romans were able to come up with something so many centuries ahead of its time. It's a structural feature called a Hippoc, and you can think of it as the world's first central heating system. As hard as this might be to believe, the Romans had underfloor heating in their homes 2,000 years ago. That's a luxury that most people in the world don't have today. Examples of Hippoc systems have been found all over former Roman territories, but the best preserved examples are in Bath, England. No matter where Hippocs are found, their design is always similar. It's a 2-foot gap beneath the floor supported by pillars, into which warm air would rush from a furnace in the corner of the room. Later, Hippocs also included gaps between the walls so heat could flow throughout the house. So long as the furnace remained lit, a Roman home could be kept warm even in the coldest months of the winter. Somehow the idea fell out of favor after the collapse of the Roman Empire. Our next artifact is carved from stone, and though it's much smaller than the strange Egyptian object, it's no less mysterious. It was found during excavation work in Vologda, Russia, in November 2013, and is no larger than a matchbox. The markings and holes on it have an industrial style, and it's possible that it might once have been part of something much larger. Nothing like it has been found elsewhere in Russia, or even elsewhere in the world. Because it's made from stone, we haven't been able to work out its approximate age. The cultural layer it was found in dates back to the 18th century, but that's not to say that this strange object dates from the same time. It may be far older than that. Archaeologist Natalia Vasilyeva, who has had the opportunity to inspect the artifact in person, believes that it was once part of a mechanism and may have been used in a navigational device. Alternatively, it could be a religious artifact belonging to a pagan cult. We really have no idea, and nor do scientists. We know that some of the ancient inhabitants of China loved making artifacts known as Jade Kongs. What we don't know is why. Countless examples of beautiful, elaborately decorated Jade Kongs have been found in the Xizang province of China, which suggests that they were created by the Liangshu culture, which lived there during the Neolithic era. Each Kong is a square tube with a circular hole through the middle, although describing them in such basic terms doesn't do justice to the artifacts. Decorations on the objects differ from Kong to Kong, but a significant portion of them have human faces painted in the corners around the hole in the middle. It's been speculated that the faces represent spirits. The basis for that idea is that, with very few exceptions, Jade Kongs are only ever found in tombs. They probably have a spiritual significance of some kind, but we can't even guess at what that significance may have been. We also can't guess why the Kongs seem to have gone out of fashion almost overnight. They were ubiquitous until around 2,000 years ago, after which it doesn't seem that any more were ever made. The site of Cusco in Peru is already famous for the ancient fort of Sacsayhuaman, which is itself a mysterious structure. We're not focusing on Sacsayhuaman today, though. Instead, we're gazing in wonder at this bizarre upside-down staircase, which has been carved directly into the face of a large granite rock. Of all the materials that the Inca could work with, granite would have been the most difficult. It's difficult for us to carve and shape it even with modern tools, and so to the Inca living several centuries ago, it ought to have been almost impossible. Clearly, a staircase that's upside down would have been useless, and even if it were the right way up, it doesn't lead anywhere. It's possible that it's an incomplete piece of building work that was abandoned before it was completed. But even if that were the case, there's no clear reason why the Inca would have chosen to start trying to shape such a difficult rock in a strategically unimportant location, and then give up after working so hard at shaping it. Some historians describe the astrolabe as the ancient world's equivalent to the computer. We're not sure whether that's 100% accurate as a description, but they certainly make for fascinating artifacts when they're discovered. Mystery surrounds the invention of the astrolabe. We know they were popular in the 13th century, but there's some evidence that the first astrolabes were made much longer ago than that. It might even have been invented by theists, but we don't know for sure. The first astrolabe was found in the Aegean of Alexandria 2,400 years ago, and then revisited and revised by the Muslim inventors of the 10th century, before catching on as an idea 300 years later. Muslims found them particularly useful because they could be used to identify the position of the Qibla, no matter where they were in the world, but they can also be used for a variety of other purposes. You can use an astrolabe to predict the transit of celestial objects in the night sky, thus keeping track of the changing seasons, and in later examples, the time of day. The most sophisticated examples of astrolabes even have charts engraved onto their surfaces that allow their owners to adjust the setting to account for time differences when traveling long distances. We've become accustomed to finding dinosaur fossils in the ground over the course of the past few centuries, but even so, some dinosaur fossils provoke more excitement than others. This one, found in Alberta, Canada in 2013, definitely fits into that category. It was found by accident by an oil company employee who was digging into the ground using heavy machinery, but he immediately realized the significance of what he'd found and called in the experts. A team arrived from the Philip Curie Dinosaur Museum of Grand Prairie, who concluded that this is the tailbone of a hadrosaur, an enormous species of duck-billed dinosaur. The fact that this 10-foot-long fossil is only the creature's tail gives you a sense of how enormous the full dinosaur would have been. The experts believe that it probably measured 50 feet from its tail to the tip of its beak. Sadly, and somewhat mysteriously, there's no sign of the rest of the dinosaur at the site. Nevertheless, it's considered one of Canada's most significant dinosaur discoveries during the past 50 years. Our next discovery concerns ancient Roman hippocausts, and now we'll dive into an even more incredible feat of ancient engineering. If you were to visit the region of Adrar in Algeria, you'd find an incredible irrigation system that's known by two names. Many people call it a qanat, but it's more accurate to call it a fugara. Through systems like this, the ancient occupants of the region could take water from distant hills and direct it to their towns and settlements. The principle is simple, yet brilliant. To make a fugara, engineers would find hills and mountains with sources of fresh water near the top, and then dig tunnels beneath the sides of the hills and mountains to allow the water to travel down, and then gather in artificial pools. The way it works is similar to the way an aqueduct works, only below the ground rather than above it. The first fugara in the world is thought to have been built in Persia a little over 2,000 years ago, but that's far less impressive than the one in Algeria in terms of size and sophistication. In 2017, a truly amazing ancient Assyrian vase was sold by Christie's auction house in London. It's an incredible feat of amethyst engineering and would be almost impossible to recreate using modern tools. How a craftsperson managed to create this 2,800 years ago is mind-boggling. It's only 3 inches tall, and yet it's been crafted with such precision that the bottom of the vase is as smooth and curved as an eggshell. Despite that, it can stand upright with no support, even though the area of the vase that's in contact with the surface it's standing on is so small that it's almost microscopic. You wouldn't be able to balance an egg on a table like this without it toppling over. So how is this beautiful vase somehow defying gravity in this way? Whoever created this stunning piece didn't have the benefit of working with a magnifying glass, so they must have had extraordinarily good eyesight and exceptionally steady hands. It might be tiny, but it has the right to be called one of the most incredible vases ever made. The color blue was very important to the ancient Maya. They used it to decorate many of their ancient monuments and sculptures, and they found a way of creating a form of blue pigment that keeps its brightness and vibrancy no matter how many years go by. The unusual properties of the Maya blue pigment were first noticed by scientists in 1931. But experts have never been totally sure how this ancient culture went about the process of creating it. Investigations in the 1960s confirmed that the persistence of the color was down to a unique chemical bond between indigo and a clay mineral called polygorskite, but the scientists of the time couldn't work out how the bond was made. In 2021, A new study of Maya blue on artifacts found at Chichen Itza solved the long-standing mystery. It seems that indigo leaves and polygorskite clay were heated up by burning copal incense, a substance taken from tree resin that acts as a natural glue. The combination of ingredients has to be measured precisely, and the heat has to be restricted to a specific temperature to avoid destroying the color. Creating Maya blue is hard, even if you know how to do it. How they came up with it in the first place is an even bigger mystery. You might have heard of the town of Roswell in New Mexico, USA, from the alleged UFO crash landing that happened there several decades ago. That's not the only strange thing to have happened in Roswell. There's also the matter of this strange stone, which a local resident found in September 2004. Someone has gone to the trouble of creating a very smooth, very elaborate pattern on the stone, and they've somehow managed to do it without leaving a single trace of whatever machinery or tool they used to make it. Even under a microscope and subjected to multiple magnifications, there are no cuts or abrasions at the edge of the markings at all. It's as if they appeared on the stone naturally, which is obviously not the case. To add a further layer of intrigue, the stone is magnetic. Place a magnet next to one of the crescent moon shapes engraved on the surface, and it will spin in a clockwise direction. Place that same magnet next to the other crescent moon, and it spins the other way. Add that to the fact that the design on the surface is identical to one that turned up as a so-called crop circle in a field in England in 1996, and you're looking at a mystery for the ages. The Inca weren't the first advanced civilization to live in Peru, but they did build some of the country's most amazing ancient monuments. One of those monuments is More in Urubamba. It might not look as visually impressive as a large temple or citadel, but this cluster of circular depressions on the ground is far more sophisticated than any temple. Dig into the ground at each layer and you'll find a different type of soil. None of the soil is native to the area. The Inca brought soil here from their other territories and planted it at different depths within the circle to find out which types of crop would or wouldn't grow. The temperature at the top of the spiral system is very different to the temperature at the bottom, with each level roughly the right temperature for the environment that the soil came from. Inca farmers could experiment with their crops here and then, after figuring out what worked, send word to farmers in other territories and tell them what they should plant for their harvests. It's an ingenious system, and it was invented more than 500 years ago. Creating a city underground isn't something that most civilizations would consider today because of the extreme difficulty of cutting into the rock and creating sophisticated structures underground. Those difficulties didn't put off our ancient ancestors. There are several notable examples of underground cities all over the world. As an example, here's Nushabad underground city in Iran. This 3-story city was created 1,500 years ago and once sheltered the Persians as they sought refuge during times of war. Nobody in the modern age even knew the city was there until a surprised resident of the modern city above the underground one found an entrance to it while digging out a sewage ditch on his land just over a decade ago. Archaeologists were called to the scene and eventually excavated a network of air ducts, canals, tunnels, chambers, and even a few booby traps. It's thought that the city is the work of the Sasanian Empire, which existed here between the years 224 and 651. The empire was at constant risk of attack throughout its existence, and probably built the city as a hiding place for women, children, and the elderly. Some archaeologists and historians claim that the Nimrude lens is the world's first telescope. Others say that it was never designed for such a function, and that its magnification properties were used to magnify the sun rays and start fires, rather than gaze at distant objects or stars. Who's right and who's wrong? Well, the debate has been ongoing for well over a century and doesn't seem likely to end anytime soon. The artifact, which is also known as the layered lens, was discovered in the ruins of an Assyrian palace in Iraq in 1850. It started life as a humble chunk of rock crystal, but was cut, shaped, and polished into its current shape. The Nimrude lens is capable of magnifying an object by a factor of 3, which might not sound like a lot, but that's the same magnification factor as the telescope that was invented in the Netherlands in 1608. The Nimrude lens was already about 2,600 years old when that Dutch telescope was invented, so it's no exaggeration to say that if the lens really was intended to be a telescope, it was thousands of years ahead of its time. We travel to Iran and head back underground to check out our next ancient wonder. This is the amazing hydraulic system beneath the city of Kish. There's an ultra-modern city right on top of these ancient structures. It offers 5-star restaurants and hotels, and many of the tourists who travel here to use these facilities have no idea that there's something so wonderful beneath their feet. This is one of the largest surviving examples of the Mesopotamian version of the qanat. Like the Fagara system we looked at earlier, this is basically a network of vertical wells built on a long, gentle slope, carrying water from the distant mountains to the valleys. This incredible feat of hydraulic engineering was completed about 2,500 years ago. There's a common misconception that the Kariza Kish is actually a former underground city, but that isn't the case. People look at these long passages and see streets, but they're just water channels. Similarly, the chambers that look like houses are merely access points. The lights and benches that you can see in some of these images aren't original features. They were added more recently by local authorities to make the old qanat more attractive to visitors. Who or what created the features known as the Malta Cart ruts in the Maltese archipelago? These deep grooves, which crisscross the land at the site of Misragar il-Kabir, have been created in solid bedrock, and yet are almost certainly artificial in origin. In one particular location, they form such a recognizable artificial pattern that they've been compared to the meeting point between train lines at Clapham Junction in London, England. We know of no natural phenomenon that would create marks like this, but we can't think of a good explanation of how ancient humans could do this either. They're known as cart ruts because they look like they were left behind by carts as they were dragged through the region. But no cart could ever leave behind such wounds in solid rock. If they're not cart ruts, they must have served some other purposes. It's been theorized that they could have been created for irrigation or perhaps as pathways to important ceremonial places, but neither theory can be proven. We have no doubt that humans made these marks many thousands of years ago, but we have no idea how or why. The ancient occupants of China not only invented the concept of a compass, but also reinvented the compass many times over. They came up with a version of a compass that looks like a fish, another compass that looks like a spoon, and then this odd device. It's known as the Southpointing chariot, because the outstretched arm of the figure atop it always points due south. Southpointing chariots were considered an essential piece of kit for travelers in China for a very long time. Evidence suggests that they were invented during the 3rd century and remained in regular use until the 13th. Unlike most compasses, the Southpointing chariot doesn't contain a magnet. Instead, it relies on its owner to manually set the arm to due south before they begin their journeys. The complex mechanisms within the device would then ensure that the arm continues to point south, no matter how many twists and turns the owner might make on their travels. This basic function, when used in conjunction with the primitive maps of the time, would give people a fighting chance of not getting lost when crossing large distances. There are still many things that we don't know about the famous giant head statues on Easter Island. But as of January 2019, archaeologists think they might know why they were placed where they are. If they're right, the location was chosen because it's close to freshwater. When the statues were built about 900 years ago, freshwater would have been the island's most precious resource because it has no streams or natural springs. Instead, water came out close to the coast or from beneath the ground through a process called groundwater discharge. Moai statues almost always appear close to such places. Even if this is true, it leaves us with a lot of questions. Why go to so much trouble to make large, elaborate statues when a simple marker would do the job of telling people there's fresh water nearby? Are the statues supposed to confirm the presence of water, or do they denote ownership of the water source? Who do the statues represent? This is the constant problem with archaeology. Even when you think you've come up with an answer, it leads to more questions. Subscribe now and turn on the bell so you don't miss a thing. Fascinating discoveries await you in every video. Thanks for your support. See you soon.